Refinery. Like I mentioned before, if we have an alarm, we're gonna meet out by the gate. Bathrooms will be back here, the food is back here as well. So you know where all that is. This time we have a facilitator on board, Interethnica. I'm gonna introduce Mona Aboud. She'll handle the facilitation. She can introduce her group. And today's topic, as you all know, be on the Flaring 101. And we'll also touch on the charter before we get going. So Mona.
All right, thank you, Brad. Welcome, everyone. I think I've met almost all of you individually. As Brad said, my name is Mona Aboud. I'm the vice president of a firm called Interethnica. First, I want to apologize for starting a little late, right at 5:30, the projectors went out. We sent the materials ahead of time, but we're gonna to troubleshoot that. But I'm really excited to share the space with you all and facilitate these discussions. I always like to say my role as a facilitator is not to provide any expertise or make decisions. It's to help us move along our topics, keep us on time, make sure we're sharing the floor as much as possible. All that being said, I apologize in advance if I ever have to cut anyone off or interject, just to make sure that we are sharing space and time, managing time, and being respectful of your time is really important to us. I've facilitated many working groups on behalf of government agencies, and they're really fun, but we also know that we don't always agree, and that's okay. We're here to also take notes and make sure we're documenting your perspectives effectively. We are recording these meetings. We have folks joining online, so I want to welcome our panelists and the members of the public that are joining online, and we'll keep them included as well. I want to start before we get into materials of the deck. I just will give a quick overview of our agenda, and then we'll get into a quick round of intros for everyone as well. Sound good? So after intros, we'll just do a quick reflection on our last meeting. What were the topics covered? What were some general themes that we heard from discussion? And then we're gonna go quickly over the working group charter that was sent to everybody. We did receive a couple comments, so we'll chat through those and the edits that were made, and you're all provided a copy of that. And the majority of our time together tonight will be going over the Flaring 101 presentation. So Alex and Katie from the Air District have a lot of content to provide. There's our deck. And we will take that in chunks and talk more about that when we get there. And we just need a couple minutes at the end to go over last steps. Again, the majority of our time is on that Flaring 101 piece. Quickly refreshing our purpose here together. So this is a forum for air quality related matters related to refinery communities. I'm trying to show you the slide, but I'm also looking at the here, so that's why I'm looking down. We're here to also solicit your input on these matters and then discuss technical aspects and build a shared understanding as much as possible. Our participation norms, these are the same as last time, just reviewing them. We want to respect everyone's voices, one person at a time. We'll try to call on folks as you're ready to speak. If you have food in your mouth, they'll come back to you. But do grab food as we go. And let's try to avoid posturing as much as possible, sharing the floor, making our points, and looking at disagreements as opportunities for more shared understanding. Input will inform amendments, and we're gonna be as much as possible in person together. We did have to make some exceptions for folks to join online, and we do want their input and for them to be included. So we'll go from there. Before we get into the rest of our agenda, we want to do a quick round of intros. So I would love it if everyone could share name, general role, and maybe one thing that stood out to you from the last meeting briefly. So I'll go to my left with our team, and then we'll bring it around and end with the areas. Thanks, everyone. Go ahead, Vanessa.
Hi, everyone. I'm Vanessa Zamora. I'll be supporting Zoom technical support. So for Zoom participants, if anyone needs support, let me know over chat. And I'm happy to be here and hear from all of you.
Hi, I'm Lisa Booth. I'm a principal in Interethnica, and I'm a designated note taker tonight. So speak slowly. I'm gonna go ahead then and pass it to my left here.
I'm Jill Africa, the meteorology measurement division of the Air District.
I'm Kate Oak, and I'm also in the meteorology measurement division.
And I'm Sharon Lim. I work for Martinez Renewable Fuels Facility. And I'm senior engineer over there, and I handle a lot of the permitting.
Okay, welcome, Sharon.
I'm Jeff Geiger. I'm with Contra Costa County Hazmat, and I'm a CalArts engineer.
Welcome.
My name is Scott Pierce. I'm with Air Products, filling in for Ramsey Anand. I'm the environmental specialist for Air Products and kind of cover a little of everything.
Okay, awesome.
Michael Marlowe, the environmental manager for Martinez Refining Company.
Todd Osterberg, I'm a senior air specialist for Chevron Richmond.
Good evening, Chuck Leonard, Plumbers Steam Fitters, Local 342.
Welcome, Chuck. Would you mind flipping around your name placard for us? Just that I always make sure I know who you are. Welcome, Chuck. Thanks for having me. Very good.
I'm Morgan, I'm an environmental specialist with, Phillips.
Eric Schmidt, environmental specialist for Air Liquide. Kevin Buchanan with Western States Petroleum Association. I'm the senior regulatory manager of Regis.
Hi, I'm Victor Douglas. I'm the regulatory director at the Bay Area Air District.
Hi, everyone. Right.
I'm Brad Cole, I'm not the IT. I'm managing the flaring project, for the air district. The one thing that stood out to me in the last meeting was how involved everybody was, and I would keep that.
Hello, everyone. My name is Alex Stone, senior Apollo engineer from the Air District, staff lead for the floor.
Yeah, I'm Katie Zhang. I'm the senior air quality specialist on supporting the flare woman. All right, and I want to bring it to our panelists online next. I know you all can't see everyone in the room, but maybe let's start with Jeff. You want to say hello, Jeff? Introduce yourself.
Hi there. My name's Jeff Kilbreth. My background is in business, with a lot of particular work with manufacturing companies and with process optimization. But in general, I'd say that my background is business. I'm retired now. In terms of this work, I have a lot of experience now working with the emissions data, and have, spent a number of years analyzing the emissions data and seeing how it has evolved and gotten better, and what still remains to be done, broadly speaking, in terms of improving the emissions data. So I'm very interested to apply that to the problem of flaring. I live in
Thank you,
Richmond.
Jeff. Great to meet you. We have also LaDonna joining. Thanks for jumping in quickly, LaDonna. Do you want to come off mute and introduce yourself to the group? Turn this around so folks can.
Yes,
see a little
good
bit.
evening, everyone. LaDonna Williams. I am Programs Director for All Positives Possible, a frontline blast zone community-based organization out of Richmond and Vallejo, working on environmental health and issues related around flaring and other impacts from these refineries. Thanks for being here.
Thank you, LaDonna. And I think our last panelist joining online is Carrie. Welcome, Carrie.
Hi, everybody. Carrie Guerin. I'm one of the Community Steering Committee members, along with Jeff, here in Richmond, North Richmond, San Pablo. And in my day job, I'm the Richmond staff attorney at Communities for a Better Environment and Environmental Justice community organizing and advocacy organization based here in Richmond and 3 other frontline California communities. Thanks.
Yeah, all right. Standing online? Okay, perfect. Then Danny. Be able to unmute.
Hey everyone, my name is Danny Fung. I am with the Bay Area Air District's Compliance and Enforcement Division.
All right, welcome, Danny. Okay, thanks for introducing yourself, everyone. I also asked you a question.
I know we all ignored it.
If you have time to do it, I'm sure. I just want to know, and not everybody has to share, what's something that stood out to you from last meeting or that you left thinking about, perhaps? I know it was a couple months ago now, so just want to get our minds back into the zone of what we're doing together. Go ahead, yeah.
I think, I hope it continues in this direction. I think that everyone kind of had a common mindset. We're all, all have different perspectives. We're all kind of looking to get the same thing out of this meeting. And I think we had kind of went around last time. Based on what people shared, that's kind of how I felt.
So thanks for sharing, Jeff. Who else?
What kind of stuck with me is the need to develop a common operating picture about flaring. Is flaring going up? Is flaring going down? Are emissions going up? Are emissions going down? Those sorts of things.
Yeah, great. Thanks, Todd. What else? Chuck, any big stand out for the last time?
I think it's gonna be almost like herding cats to get 4 refining companies to have the same perspective on flaring. and all agree that have the same ideas and have the same rules and cause and effect and everything else that goes along with flaring.
Yeah, so you better work it out for us here.
There's that, because there's certain elements to it,
Absolutely.
right, to flaring. I've caused flaring. There's not very many people in here that go there. Yeah, I pulled a fuse on a compressor and caused flaring,
Okay.
and it's that easy. And so
So we've got a lot to talk about.
Yeah,
I'm
there's-
glad that perspective is here tonight with us.
there's a lot to flare.
What else stood out from the last meeting? Jeff, come on in. Thanks, Vanessa. Jeff, online. There you go.
Hi. Well, I think, I agree that every refinery is different, for sure. And therefore, the particulars are different. But if you flip your scope on it all and just say, hey, we know that flaring's necessary for safety reasons, and there are many things that trigger those safety concerns. And therefore, we need flaring systems. The issue is not to get, kind of like all caught up in those weeds necessarily, but rather to focus on what are the public health problems, if any, caused by our current flaring systems, and what can we do, what's economically reasonable, and what's really needed for the community to have better health. Everybody knows, certainly anybody who lives in Richmond or has been anywhere near a Richmond school knows that we have an incredible problem with asthma. We're looking to make that better. And we think flaring is not the main thing, but we think it's an important contributor, at least sometimes. And we want to get to the bottom of that and see if there is a way in which better flaring systems and better, let's say better flaring systems and better flaring prevention, reduction.
Is that what stood out most from the last meeting, Jeff?
What?
I think you're gonna like what's in the presentation today. It starts to get into that, but is that what stood out most from you for the last?
Well, what
meeting?
stood out for me most from last meeting was that we had representatives from, all of the refineries and their various, support organizations, and that's terrific. I mean, I don't want to talk about these issues, only with BACMD, I mean, I want to talk about, I live in Richmond. What I care about is public health in Richmond. And what I saw at the last meeting was a chance to talk directly with people who actually work at the refineries about how we can think together to improve public health. It's sort of that simple. So that was terrific from my point of view.
Thank you, Jeff. Anybody else have anything they wanted to share from last meeting? Victor?
Yeah, what I got from last meeting was this is apparently an important issue for everybody, or we wouldn't have had such a turnout here. We may not always agree on the various aspects of the issue, but we recognize it's an important issue and it's worth and merits discussion and getting to a point of consensus if possible. And I appreciate, your comings before this and attending the first meeting and attending this meeting, because it shows that it's important to you and that you want to get this right and we want to work together to do so. And that's what I got from the last meeting and your attendance this meeting, so it's appreciated. Thank you.
Thank you. Kevin, what's up?
Yeah, I was just thinking about, I thought one of the things that struck me was how Deputy Atco Fran walked through and got feedback from everybody and kind of put some guardrails on the discussion, so we stayed on point. No one dominated conversations, and he made sure kind of we moved around the room, and just that facilitation skill, something that stood out to me, and I'm hoping we'll continue to see that with you.
Okay, thank you. Big shoes to fill. Appreciate that, Kevin. All right, anything else? We can go on. Okay, let me just give a quick refresher of the topics from last meeting. It was back at the end of June. I wasn't here, but I was joining virtually. I watched as much of it as we could and definitely read through the notes. So sort of the four key topics that were presented was about this working group's purpose, roles, and advisory function. Initial themes and input, a little bit of input from the group. We had some questions that were asked and there was a lot of that shared discussion. There was a bit of background on rules 1211 and 1215. And then the Air District also shared the impetus for the flare ruling amendments. And I know you can't see the slides right now, but I just want to go over some of the themes that were heard so that, you know that we're listening and organizing this input, but also reminding the group of what was shared. So from the community perspective, there was a lot of discussion about faster, clearer communication during flaring events, about real-time alerts that distinguish between routine versus a hazardous flare. And there was concern over cumulative health impacts in communities. From the refinery and industry or technical side, there was a lot of talk about flares as essential safety devices, flexibility to reflect site-specific conditions and rules, and alignment between all of the rules. Where is the alignment between 1211, 1212, and 13.5? Labor also brought up some interesting perspectives around life-saving roles of flares, some important notes, and the need for feasible rules that protect worker and safety jobs. And then sort of across the group, there was some shared technical interest about clarifying maybe what's a bad flare or a really bad flare versus permitted emissions, reviewing historic flaring data and costs. So you brought that up a little bit, that was that historic data, and then understanding overlapping rule requirements and local impacts. So it's a little bit just refreshing us on what we talked about last meeting, a little bit of what was top of mind, and some topics. And I want to get into our charter piece. So we had sent out the charter for comment a while ago. I'm seeing some nods. I think a lot of folks read it. We received a few comments. Just want to go over what the key points of the charter were. We're not going to take this meeting to read it in detail, but you were given a copy of it. For those of you that are joining virtually, you were also given a copy of it. And the key points are really that this working group is convened by the Air District to provide input on the refinery rules and related topics. The purpose is to do exactly what you all mentioned earlier, was to bring different perspectives together. So to not have conversations in isolation, but to have industry, community, labor, and agency voices in one room to have a discussion on these topics. Working group comments and input will inform the Air District rulemaking. So what we are discussing here will inform the future. That will meet every other month we'll meet per 2 hours. We're gonna try our best to get out of here on time every time, and we'll meet here in Richmond. That one designated member per organization will join, and an alternate will be there in place. And that materials will be sent 1 week in advance. We sent these 6 days in advance last week, so apologies for the missed day there, but I hope that was enough time. And that you'll review materials and come prepared as much as possible. So if we have specific things we'd like you to look at before the meeting, we'll make sure to call that out when we send it to you. Maybe we'll get our deck up. This is the last piece that you don't have. Everything else is printed, so we'll get it together. A quick overview that the charter was sent on the 30th. The deadline for comments was the 13th. We've received 2 comments. I just want to talk through the comments. I think Kevin had sent in some comments. Perfect. I'm almost nervous to switch over to the charter to lose the deck, but Kevin had sent in some comments from the LISPA team, and Jeff, we got your comments as well. And so just want to respond to a couple of comments and let you know what updates were made. So I don't know if you can share the charter itself. Jeff's comment, let's start with that one while Vanessa pulls it up. I want to first thank you for the feedback. I think that there's a couple of important things you want to share. This charter was used about 4 or 5 years ago for another Air District working group. So the language is not a template, but it was recycled from there and brought in here. And that the charter is meant to be really clear and to the point. And so your note on tone, Jeff, is well taken. Jeff, the one joining online, has shared that. It sort of seems like the number one point is to share that this is not a decision-making body, but at the same time, that input is still valuable. We want to make sure that that is clear, that while no one's making decisions here, including the Air District, we're not trying to decide on one thing, that input from all perspectives will be taken back. And another comment Jeff had made is, how do we make consensus or vote? We're actually not going to be doing that together. We're not going to be voting. We're not working to just build consensus. Where we agree, that's fantastic. Where we can work through challenges, even better. But where we have disagreements, that's okay too. And we're going to make sure that we do our best to note that, not only here in this room, but in the documentation that follows these working groups. And Jeff, I hope that your comments also mean that you'll be holding us accountable to that. You'll be looking at these post-meeting summaries to make sure that everyone's input is reflected. But we're not a voting body here. And while the air district is anticipating any comments or questions you send, they may or may not be able to respond to each one. I want to also remind us, this is one space to ask questions and ask for direction and get input. There's other bodies where we may help direct some of the feedback or questions to. That could be to the CAC, that could be to the CSC, that could be to other groups that are talking and working through matters related here. So I don't want to discount or discourage any particular question or sort of any kind of ask for information. We will take that back and figure out who's the best person to bring that towards, keeping our 2-hour meetings on time as much as possible. And then the other comments came from Kevin at WISPA, and they were about meetings during normal business hours. We are having these in the evening. I appreciate the comment. I think that the Air District had decided to keep these in the evening to have as much participation as possible, and that the members should demonstrate some level of technical knowledge. And so I want to share some of the updates to the charter that are highlighted. The first is that we adapted, this is the end of page 1, starting on page 2, the language that the Air District may or may not respond to comments. And instead of saying that the Air District may not provide formal written comments to feedback received, but that we will document input requests. And in the meeting notes and summaries, and then where feasible, we will also help identify where that input will be considered in the rulemaking process. So wherever we have those summaries come back and the rules are updated, we'll do our best to say, this is where we heard that information from, so that documentation is clear. You can keep scrolling. In working group members, so this is sort of adapting based on the update from WISPA, the comment from WISPA, excuse me, that members should demonstrate some level of industry, agency, community, or labor-related knowledge of the topics being brought forth today. So not just technical expertise, but also the expertise from each perspective, and that we're speaking to that. You can keep scrolling down a little bit.
Before,
Go ahead.
sorry, before we go off the subject about changing it to daytime hours, are the folks online receptive to changing it to normal business hours? That's one question is, I know we're trying to target, the public, but the public who's showing up that's online right now, is it possible for them to do daylight, normal working hours? Is that that's a good question for those who are online, and, I want to get their feedback because everyone's time is valuable. And so spending it with your family, you have kids or, if you have other activities. So I'm just wondering, is it possible for those folks that are on the line right now, is it acceptable to them?
Yeah, I think that we could take that back and ask for the next meeting. I don't know that we have the answer today, because I know that some of the folks joining online are not the primary working group member themselves, so I don't want to pull those that are here to make
You're
decisions for the
accountable,
future. Yeah, but we could take it back and see if there's an adjustment. As of right now, though, we are planning to be in the evening. But I appreciate the comment.
I'm kind of on that. I was thinking, if we look at, so I know the Air District staff most likely can be here during the business day. I mean, I don't want to speak for you, but we used to have technical working groups in the past, which were great, and we had them during the business day. I know all the refineries, because I talked to all of them, would prefer that the working group meetings be during the business day. That in this room means that about almost 90% of the people here would prefer to have it during the normal business day. So I just wanted to emphasize that if we're going to continue to stay in the evenings, then from my perspective, we're essentially a very small group of people that attend this, as opposed to the greater majority of the people that are already coming here. So just food for thought.
Yeah, it's duly noted, and I think that we can check with everybody, and we do want to make sure that everyone's in the room and not lean into one majority or less majority perspective, but to make sure that the perspectives are here, but we'll definitely take it back and ask, and I do appreciate the perspective.
And I think if they're a technical working group member and they're local, that they should be here physically. I know I've made that commitment. Granted, it's through 2 hours every other month or something like that. I don't think that's asking a lot.
Yeah, and I believe that is the plan. I do want to share that. I think Jeff had an exception just for the summer. And LaDonna is joining virtually, and we called her about, 30-45 minutes ago. So I just want her to know that we're not making that comment directly towards you, LaDonna, that we appreciate you being here right now. And I appreciate the comment.
Thanks.
You could keep scrolling down. Nothing here has changed. I think there's just one more edit. Go to the highlighted section. Yes. So we just updated this end of, I think it's the third bullet point on page 4. To note that consensus is not required and areas of alignment and misalignment will be documented to make sure that the full range of perspectives are visible and can inform your district deliberations. And this is to say we're, we do hope that we're able to find consensus wherever possible, but that we know it's important for you all that where you disagree, that that's documented somewhere in the record, and we're gonna make sure that that documentation is made in there. And I believe that that was the last edit to the charter. So everyone has a copy. We sent out a copy virtually as well. And I know that we could probably spend 4 hours working through a charter together if needed, but that's our purpose today is really to dive into the refinery flaring 101, and that's going to take quite a bit of time. That presentation, we've broken into 4 sections for you all. And at the end of each of those sections, we will pause for discussion. So for those of you here in person, we have a printout of it. That way, Lisa Jack, it's fine. On that printout, each page is one of the slides. So at the top, it'll say the slide number. And then as you go through, there's space for you to leave comments or questions. Again, we'll pause at the end of each section for discussion, but I do invite you to write down comments and questions as we go. This in case we don't have enough time to get to everyone's comment. Additionally, this is a tool for you to use or not. You can write things down, you may not. We will be happy to collect whatever comments you leave on here and add them into the notes. And if you don't want us to take what you wrote down and it's just scribble scrabble for yourself, that's fine too. Again, it's just a tool to be helpful. So before we get into the presentation, I also want to note that this presentation is something that is a starting point here. It is a lot of content that hopefully will go to the community eventually. And so its goal is to be able to answer key questions about flaring and information that we think the community should know and the public should know. And your perspectives are really valuable here, not just in questions to the Air District, but what from your input, from your viewpoints is accurate, what's additional context that you think needs to be added to this. And so when we pause, we'll be pausing sort of from that, but if you have questions as well, I think the Air District will be happy to answer. Go ahead, Michael.
They use the term eventually. We get to the public eventually.
Yes.
And that's I made a comment last time. I was very interested in seeing something like this prepared for the public. What's the timing on getting something like this to the public? If we have a 2-hour meeting today, and then in October, we're meeting on 12/15, what's gonna happen to this?
So right now, this is draft content after input. The Air District will take input back from this meeting, update it, and it'll go through the communications team to look at. And we're planning a public workshop on this topic early in January. I think is that still what we're talking about? We shifted it back a couple times, but this is the first step in getting that input on that process, on this presentation, to update it and then get it to the public at that meeting, as well as the CSC and some other presentations. So within a handful of months, I should say. Yeah.
Thank you very much.
Yeah, the workshop is gonna be specifically on concepts for flaring. And we hope to have the flaring 101 content with community input from the CSC and other groups, and have our comms and EJ folks look at it to make it more digestible for the public by that workshop.
Yeah.
So that's the goal.
I can't speak for the other refineries, of course, but I know from my perspective, MRC's perspective, this would be better sooner than later.
Yeah. That was great.
Yeah.
What is CSP?
CSC is the Community Steering Committee, the Richmond.
Oh, for Richmond, okay.
Yeah,
gotcha.
yeah,
All right.
sorry. And if I have to say
Acronyms.
acronym, you don't know.
It's a new term.
Yeah.
Yeah, a billion of them in the industry, so.
Absolutely. Okay, just right before LaDonna jumps in, and with that sort of process and timeline in mind, this is the first outside of Air District input that's coming to this presentation, right? So I think you all are getting the first crack at guiding the next iteration. So keep that in mind as we go. And LaDonna, feel free to jump in.
Yeah, I just wanted to add, I didn't get the gentleman's name that spoke, and no, I didn't take it personal because I know you all knew, the time in which you called me to participate, which I appreciate. But I do want to speak on behalf of those that may have issues, but still trying to engage in these processes. And we hear this all the time where it'll be, well, the least they could do is show up in person. And I asked that person, what would the difference be if a member of the working group is in person or they graciously take the time to be on a Zoom. The main thing is they're participating in these processes that are difficult enough as they are, because at least for, and I know I can speak on behalf of the populations that I serve in and live and work and pray and play in, many of us are taking care of our elderly parents, as well as disabled children, as well as some have smaller children. They have these obligations, yet they take the time out to try and engage in these processes. So I would just caution us to not put people on the spot who may have to participate in these processes on Zoom, because you have no idea what many of us, especially frontline communities, are dealing with.
Thank you, Madonna. All right, so with that, I'm gonna turn things over to Katie, who's gonna get us started on the Flaring 101 presentation. We'll take our first pause. You'll see little clocks on the screen. This is just to let us know what time we should move on into the next section. If we need more time, we can take more time, but then we'll be losing time in later parts of our meeting. So it's a guide for us. So I'll hand it off to you, Katie, to get us started.
Okay, thanks, Mona. Yeah, so there's 4 parts, as Mona mentioned. So these are the 4 parts. For part 1, we try to separate these different parts, have similar themes. Okay, next slide. All right, so before we jump into the content that we're reviewing, just a little bit of background on Flaring 101. What is Flaring 101? It's in quotes because, you know, if the official name might be something else later, this is just like our project name right now. So what is it? Flaring 101 is being developed by the Air District to educate the public, especially residents in refinery communities, on flaring. The educational material is not intended to provide guidance on how the public should respond to incidents related to flaring. This incident response guidance comes from our first responder partners, not the Air District. What is the impetus for developing this material? Similar to the flare rule amendment, it's the impetus is twofold. So the Air District strategic plan, so the Air District has committed to this, and also it's in the Assembly Bill 617, Richmond, San Pablo Community Emission Reduction Plan. So that's the community steering committee, and you know, Carrie and Jeff are on that committee. Next slide. Okay, and so Mona mentioned a little bit like how this is gonna go. So the content is in question and answer format. The focus of our discussion today is ensure the content is factual, and then also provide, also for you guys, feel free to provide suggestions on how to help the audience of material understand the material more easily. So, you know, maybe you have another word, you know, for a technical term, right? The Air District will consider this input when developing that final document that's distributed to the public. Okay, now we'll move into part 1. So the first question, what is a flare system? A flare system is a safety device used to control and safely burn excess gases from industrial processes, like from refineries and hydrogen production plants. Flares burn excess gases instead of releasing them directly into the atmosphere, resulting in lesser environmental and health impact. Flares prevent the buildup of pressure and may prevent a more catastrophic event like an equipment failure resulting in rupture that could also lead to an explosion or fire. Refinery flares have flare gas recovery systems to minimize flaring. During normal operation, flare gas recovery systems convert excess gases into refinery fuel gas, which is then combusted in furnaces and boilers. When there is an imbalance in the flare gas recovery system, the excess gases are routed to the flare. All right, next slide. Okay, how do flares operate? Flares have a pilot light similar to a hot water heater that continuously burns. The flare is always ready to burn excess gases. Liquid and gases flow continuously through piping and equipment. These processes operate at specific conditions like temperature and pressure. At refineries, these temperatures range from 600 to 1100 degrees Fahrenheit. The process is sensitive to the conditions changing. So
If there is a critical change in operating conditions that causes an imbalance, there is an attempt to control the condition. If the change in condition can't be controlled, excess gases are diverted to the flare for controlled burning. And then 2 of the key operating levers to promote efficient combustion are steam or air injection and supplemental natural gas. In regards to steam, steam provides adequate air supply and improves mixing of gases involved in combustion. Steam creates turbulence, which does 2 main things. 1, draws in air from the atmosphere, and 2, promotes mixing of the fuel in the air. And steam reduces visual emissions or smoke. For supplemental natural gas is a known fuel that improves combustion. Supplemental natural gas may be added to raise heat content and flame temperature, which enhances the combustion reaction of some excess gases that may not burn as efficiently on their own. That was a lot. Okay, next one. We'll wait.
We're waiting
till
for
the
questions at the end.
Yeah, the end of this section, which is just a couple. Yeah, this is the last one of this section. Which operations or process units do flares serve? So where does a flare gas come from? Flare configuration and the process units each flare serves are site specific. For refineries, this information is on the Air District website and each refinery's flare minimization plan. So on the right side, there's a QR code to the web page and the URLs underneath. Okay, that's the end of this first section. It's the shortest section. So I noticed that there was one question from you, Todd, coming in on slide 15. Maybe we can start there, and then I'd love to open it to Jeff and Carrie and LaDonna online while we have further discussion. So did you have a specific question?
Yeah, just maybe an add. So on the section where we're talking about steam and supplemental gas, or there's an intricacy there. So those 2 things are fighting against each other, and I'm not sure you get that reading the slide. And so when you inject steam, that cools the flare, however, that lowers your combustion efficiency. And so under the federal rules, you're required to keep a certain amount of BTUs there. And so there's very much a balancing act, so it makes it sound a little bit easier than it is. It's not.
Right, and that's something I'll get into in the next section when I talk about, there are risks. Operating steam flare, over assisting, under assisting, as you said. As you inject steam, you need more heat, so you need to have more supplemental gas. And if you're right, it is a convenient factor and that makes operating really more difficult. And, yeah, I'll definitely get more into that in my section of the regulation.
Noted. So how does this information you just heard land with you? Let's see if LaDonna, Jeff, or Carrie online have any comments on what you just heard. Raise your hand or just come off mute. All right, what about in the room? How does oh, sorry, Carrie, go ahead.
No, just to say that I'm hearing your question in the prompt, and then I'm gonna see how the presentation's gone, since I'm hearing that we're getting a little bit more information than just what's on the slides, and so I'll hold them until the end there, but I appreciate the invitation.
Okay, thank you very much. All right, how did that land with you all? Is there any additional context like Todd just added that you want to bring into those last couple slides? Did the information feel factual in general? We have a little bit of time for discussion.
I think generally it's factual. I would like to say on, I think it was the first slide, the flaring is the exception. You do point out before flares that have flare gas recovery, that is normal operation, but flaring really is the last resort. Point 40, so you do point out it is normal flaring, but I think if this is going to the public, it should be pointed out that this is not our preferred method of controlling process changes.
Okay, so flare as last resort, more emphasized there. And I see Jeff, your hand up, will come in next.
I was just gonna say, I liked the analogy with the pilot light and not hot water being their heater. I think that's helpful, especially when talking to the public, or like when I describe flares to my mom, she doesn't know what a pilot is, so I have to describe it when she knows. So I like that.
Okay, analogy was helpful. Trying to hear it. Jeff, jump in. See your hands raised.
I think that maybe in this, if this is the high level, really, 101, and maybe we should have, 201, 301, 401. or something to show that, you know, our growing levels of complexity or deep diveness, I guess. At the high level, I think what was just said is an important point. In theory, flares are a solution of last resort. But every refinery does it differently. And so the whole question about what are the tools, what are the systems, what are the processes that are available, at least theoretically, potentially, to be able to avoid flaring, would be a good addition to this first 101 chapter. In other words, one slide on how do you avoid flaring? You know, I mean, to the degree to which you would, in an ideal world, you would avoid it, right? So yeah, all right, but I think everybody gets the point with that.
Thank you, Jeff. Thank you, Jeff. Chuck,
You're gonna love this.
okay. Throw it at me.
Is this meant to educate the public? All right, you're gonna love this. I've done this work for decades. I didn't understand the word that's going on here. This is common language amongst educated people that are trained to do this. I've done safety interlock systems after shutdowns. We go through this and we systematically make sure that these systems work and they don't deflare. I understand that. You're like you said, the pilot line, simple. You're talking about a fence line community. You're talking about a community that you're gonna have to educate at a level where fundamentally everybody in this room, this is your language. This is your education. You understand everything that's going on here. I'm looking at this going, that's pretty interesting. I never knew this. And I've actually done the work. You're almost better if you do this in a cartoon format, literally, so people will understand it. Because if you're talking about educating people, and you call this 101, I'm thinking, this is 401.
Okay. So
I mean, from my perspective, people in systems that may not have even graduated from high school.
So
Right.
further simplify the language, and I
Right.
think that's part of the process coming forward.
Absolutely, and I think because the information, you know, amongst the educated people here, and you guys are figuring out with steam and air and everything else and figuring out, is it right? And, you know, but the common person, the layman is sitting outside that fence, they're not gonna understand. Right, but what they do understand is a pilot on a hot water heater, but you're gonna literally almost have to keep it extremely simple in a 30 to 60-minute commercial, and this captivating where they can go, oh, well, I understand what happened. Right, and that's my input, that's my input thing.
Yeah, of course, and I think that what that also tells us is before we even get into the first slide of 101, to zoom out a little bit more and simplifying the language is coming. We hear you, and it sounds like the analogy is a helpful example or an animated video, something that tells the story a little bit more instead of the technical piece. And I think that's fair. Go ahead, Sharon.
And so,
let me know someone online.
This would be good about adding a picture, right? Cause you know, you got pictures of a flare and you could have a little blower at the bottom that say, hey, this is, increases the air, it's air assisted. Or it could have a steam valve and say, oh, this opens up more so that you can assist, you know, the flame. And so you could actually have a drawing, a simplified version to share with the public. That would be something that I mean, it would explain things, in little pilots on the flare tip, you know, to demonstrate where the little flames are.
With some kind of imagery, some kind of animation.
And we sent that to Victor before. I don't know, Victor, if you still got it, we can resend it.
Yeah, we shared it with staff.
Oh, okay.
There are a couple pictures coming later, but out of that. Alex, did you have a question or response?
I guess, I was just looking to share some context of what we're looking to achieve through this meeting is. The reason why we're presenting this to the working group is to establish this kind of technical based knowledge, since people here are, technically minded and, you guys, wow. Let's do work closer with, the flare operations and very knowledgeable, so we're just trying to ensure that. Maybe, what we're looking to present here, maybe over technical, you're right, and even Paul's comment, adding steam lowers the heat content of the steam, but you also need sufficient heat content. So you have natural gas, kind of those kind of conflicting, and and I'll get into that in my section. And those are likely not going to be the language I will be using to the general public. But there's also the kind of challenge here is like, how can we explain it to the public without using a technical language or words? So that's something I guess me and my team need to look into and work toward. But at least for this meeting, we're just trying to gather the technical expertise and make sure that what we have here is accurate, as you guys are very familiar with this, the content available here.
Thank you. So think of this as the technical backing to then what will become more simplified for them. Okay.
Yeah, and I'll add on to what Alex said. So the second thing is, yeah, if you guys have suggestions on, more, I guess, like terms, like less technical terms that are explaining the same thing, like please provide feedback here, or if you think of something later, you can email us too.
On slide 14, my thought process was that the right to safely burn excess gases. And then it's not till number 4 that you talk about the flare gas primarily goes through a recovery system first. It's not designed to go to the flare, it's designed to be recovered and used in the refinery for other purposes. In the event that's not successful, that's the excess gas that gets burned. And I think that putting that last instead of first kind of takes away from the whole process of what's actually happening at a refinery. I think that's kind of what somebody said earlier, but I thought it was important. Maybe you switch those around and use some different combined language from the recovery systems. Because that's predominantly what happens on a regular, normal operating basis, 99.99% of the time.
Helpful, thank you. Terry, come on in.
Hi there. Yeah, since we're talking a bit about the pilot light analogy, I just want to caution us that it might be a little misleading of an analogy. And it's great in the sense that it's something that the public is more likely to have experience with, right? We know what pilot lights are, they're in our house. I'm afraid though that it might paint a little bit of a benign picture in the sense that a pilot light is always running. And indeed, there's a piece that's always running there, but when we see visually flaring events, that's not just the pilot light operating itself as a standalone pilot light. That's as a result of that buildup of gas and pressure. So I just want to make sure that we're not relying too much on the pilot light analogy to explain when we see the big visual flare in the community. And so I think in that sense, the pilot light might be a little distracting of an analogy there. But I appreciate the ways that we're thinking through how we best communicate technical concepts to the community. So much appreciated.
Okay, so it sounds like analogies are helpful. The pilot light one might diminish some of the emphasis on the other pieces. So make sure it's spoken about in the correct sort of framing, or that in general, a different analogy. I think we got that, Carrie. Thank you. All right. We're right on time to shift to part 2. If we have more questions on part 1, you can write them down, or if we have more time later, we can come back, but let's get into more of the meat of it. So now I'll pass it to Alex to go over the next section, if we can tee that up. And this is types of flares, emissions and impacts, the difference between refinery and hydrogen flares. This section's a little bit longer, so I'll hand it to you.
Thanks, Fiona. Next slide, please. So I'll be starting off with what are the different types of flaring that can be categorized under regulation. So there are 2 types of flaring under Rule 12.12, and that's emergency flaring and non-emergency flaring. Rule 12.12, first of all, prohibits all flaring unless it is consistent with the approved flare minimization plan, or the flaring is caused by an event that qualifies an emergency. And I did leave on the slide at the bottom, there's a definition of emergency from Rule 1212, and that is section 201. And I'll read that out just for the context. So emergency is defined as a condition at a refinery beyond the reasonable control of the owner or operator, requiring immediate corrective action to restore normal operation that is caused by a sudden, infrequent, and not reasonably preventable equipment failure, natural disaster, act of war, or terrorism or external power curtailment, excluding power curtailment due to an interruptible power supply agreement from a utility. So there's also a non-emergency flaring that refers to flaring due to a condition that does not meet the definition of emergency. And though these are not defined, these are not definitions defined in the rule, but non-emergency flaring are broken down into two categories, which include unplanned and planned flaring. Planned flaring refers to flaring due to activity that may have been planned, including startup, shutdown, and maintenance of refinery process units. Unplanned flaring refers to flaring due to activity that were not planned, including equipment breakdown and process malfunctions. Next slide, please.
Before we go, it'd be great is if you could put that narrative from here about, especially the non-flaring, because I know one of the things that happens is people are seeing there's a specific refinery in Richmond that has a hydrogen plant flaring, and people see that and go, oh my gosh, and yet it's required. So I think, Alex, if you could put that thing that you just said somewhere in this thing here or in the notes or something, I think that would really clarify a lot more about what the different, like a good example of land flaring.
Thanks, Kevin. We're gonna hold comments and questions till we get to the next section, to the end of this section.
Oh, sorry.
If you want to write that down, just so that we can get through this piece of content and have enough time for.
Wait, I need clarification. What is he holding up? Which one? Oh, it's mine. It's just mine. Okay, sorry.
I think that this is the 101. You guys are gonna use this when you educate the public, the slide deck. So I figured if you had that in there. It would be
Okay, so now getting to what are the emissions and impacts from refinery flares. So while I understand the flares are an important safety device used at refiners to help reduce gas releases that negatively impact the environment and nearby communities, they can also create unwanted side effects and byproducts, which include NOx or nitrogen oxide emissions, which is a byproduct of emissions from the combustion sources, volatile organic compound or VOC and methane emissions. While most of the hydrocarbons in the bank gas mixture are converted to carbon dioxide, some may still be emitted by end of the flaring process. Sulfur dioxide or SO2 emissions are expected from refinery flares since bank gases often contain elevated sulfur concentration, leading to SO2 emissions. Particulate matter or PM emissions, along with visible smoke, which can be reduced through proper design and operation of a flare. This will be discussed more on the next slide. There also may be noise and bright, visible, large flame and while while the refinery flare is in operation. Next slide, please. So, continuing on, just to touch base on how emissions would differ when flares are operated properly versus when flare may be improperly operated or overloaded. So when the flares are operated properly, volatile organic compound, methane, and PM emissions are expected to be significantly reduced. Ideally, hydrocarbons and methane in the vent gas should be converted to carbon dioxide through complete combustion. PM emissions, smoke, and soot are minimized since these are typically result from incomplete combustion. As Katie mentioned before, proper steam injection and natural gas supplementation is key to controlling emissions from flare operation. And when flares are operated improperly or overloaded, there may be significant emissions, including volatile organic compound, methane, and particulate matter emissions. Primarily due to incomplete combustion, which can have adverse effect to the nearby communities. Overload or poorly operated flare may result in large visible dark plume of smoke in worst case scenario. And just to touch base on the kind of complexity of operating a steam flare, which is operated at any refinery site, is you typically add steam to promote mixing, as Katie mentioned, as well as add oxygen to allow complete combustion of some of the heavier hydrocarbons. But kind of the side effect of that is the heat content associated with the vent gas, as there is a certain requirement that the vent gas mixture need to hit a certain heat content requirement, and it drops the heat content down. So, and you need additional supplemental gas or natural gas to raise the heat content up. So it becomes, it can be a very challenging operation when, especially when the vent gas composition change rapidly, as well as the load associated routed to the flare can be changed during a scenario where it may be an emergency or unplanned scenarios. Next slide, please. On these slides, it contains a QR code link to the website containing flare trend data and Rule 1211 on monthly flare data. The data provided here includes flare trend data, which includes trends related to emissions, magnitude, and frequency of flaring events, as well as Rule 1211 monthly flare data is regularly updated on our website. And below the QR code, there is also the website URL that can be accessed for your information. Next slide, please. So I just want to quickly touch base on what are the key differences between refinery flares and hydrogen flares. So the key difference between these two flares, first of all, emissions are very different between these two flares. And one of the primary differences is sulfur dioxide or SO2 emissions and particulate matter or PM emissions expected from refinery flares. So there is SO2 and PM emission expected from refinery flares, whereas they're expected SO2 and particulate matter emissions are expected to be negligible from a hydrogen. The reason why SO2 emissions are expected from refinery flare, as I mentioned before, is due to elevated sulfur concentration that typically contained in the vent gas routed to refinery flare, which leads to SO2 emissions. As for particulate matter emissions are also expected from refinery flare due to incomplete combustion that may occur, due to a fuel-rich combustion that may be due to pore mixing, or due to heavier hydrocarbon that may be present in the, and that can be also lead to incomplete combustion, leading to generation of particulate matter. Particulate matter emissions from hydrogen flares are expected to be negligible, as the vent gas routed to hydrocarbon flares do not contain complex mixture of hydrocarbon expected in refinery flare. So now kind of touching base on vent gas, kind of did touch base here before, but vent gas routed to these flare also have very different vent gas composition. Vent gas routed to refinery flare include a complex mixture of hydrocarbons, including heavier hydrocarbon, which makes achieving high combustion efficiency much more challenging. The vent gas routed to hydrogen flares consists of typically hydrogen and lighter gases, including CO2, carbon monoxide, and methane, which makes achieving high combustion efficiency much more manageable. Lastly, refinery flares typically require steam or air assistance, which is another factor that complicates operating a refinery flare versus a hydrogen flare. With complex mixture of hydrocarbon present in the vent gas routed to refinery flares, these flares typically require air or steam assistance to promote complete combustion of the vent gas. With steam or air assistance is often necessary, but it could lead to technical operating challenges, which we could based on over assisting, which could lead to incomplete combustion and increased emissions. Next slide, please. So I just wanted to quickly touch base on what are the visual cues that air district look for when operating flare. This slide provides a picture of a flare operation, which includes increasing combustion speed from left to right. And you can also see that as going from the left to right, you can see the flame getting larger and brighter. And the higher combustion efficiency, what that means is a higher conversion of VOCs or volatile organic compounds to carbon dioxide, leading to lower emissions. So I definitely understand that it may be concerning from public or community to see a larger, brighter flame. But the air district typically is looking for this visual cue of larger flame during a flame operation as a way to ensure that the air is operating properly. Next slide, please.
Okay, thank you, Alex. So types of flares, emissions and impact, differences between hydrogen and refinery flares. Michael, you had a comment earlier. I don't know, was it for a particular slide or?
Just for the hydrogen flares, I just want to make, we got 13.5 coming into effect, and what are they? we'll be putting in 3 hydrogen flares for our plan, so. I make sure that those are easily discernible to the public, so.
Okay.
Maybe more emphasis on that, and this would be good.
So
That'll
more
make it
emphasis
up.
on the difference?
Yes,
So, yeah.
I'd say a lot more emphasis. So when we installed our hydrogen plant flare, there was a general perception that flaring increased at the refinery. What's really going on there is hydrogen flares are much different than flares for hydrocarbons. So they have a continual flame, and because they don't have steam, you can see the flame all the time.
Okay.
And the other piece of that is because of Rule 13.5, fact or best available control technology for hydrogen plants is a flare. So it's driven by the district's own rules. I don't think there's a lot of understanding of that.
Okay, is there additional context that we wanna get into about that now, that you think the air district needs?
I think we could add a bit to this slide 23, maybe. I mean, this might be a much longer discussion, but I
Okay.
think that's probably where it maybe sits. We can talk to Alex about it.
Do you have any follow-up questions or anything for now?
Not for now, but because we're excited to discuss.
these were installed, sorry for jumping in.
That's okay.
These were installed to control, instead of venting to the atmosphere, what's currently happening in a lot of instances. I mean, stuff just goes straight up in the air. So we're controlling that part of this rule, and we're burning it, and it's gonna be very visible.
Okay.
And we have the same thing with our plexiglass flare. It's got plexiglass purging it 100% of the time, so you have a nice bright flame. And we often get calls that we're flaring because that's just a purge gas.
Okay.
And then when it goes off, you really, when it actually is used, it's plexiglass that you burn all over the refinery. So it's not, it's almost like hydrogen flares.
Okay,
So there are differences in good and bad flares, I guess, if we're looking at that whole issue.
yeah. LaDonna, I see your hand up. Come on in, and then Jennifer, Carrie, you're welcome as well after LaDonna. Thank you.
Yeah, can you go back to the slide? It might be before it. I was just trying to look and see where it says, what are the emissions and impacts from refinery flares? Do you know
Maybe
which?
slide 20.
Um,
Well, there's a couple actually, slide 20 or slide 21.
yeah, okay, so I guess because my screen is showing it, that the wording is split, so it's really hard to see it. Okay, so that was one. Can you go back one more previous to that one? Okay, yeah, see, the words are jumbled on mine, but it looks like, what are the emissions, maybe impacts from refinery flares?
Yeah,
Okay, that's one. Can you go back one more? Okay, what are the differences of it? Okay, so what comes to mind to me is there needs to be some language in there on what are these impacts to human health? Because I was waiting for us to get there, and I even went on the links, and we shouldn't have to, scroll all over the place and get frustrated before we see that language. So, human and animal health, we need to see some of that early on, or at least it's easy to access.
okay. Thank you, LaDonna. Anything else in this section that you want to add? Some more information on the health impacts.
No, but I think we've come a long way from the explanation they used to give to us, those of us that really don't know this language, but we're trying to learn it. It used to be that black smoke is bad and the white smoke, don't worry about it. So it's good to see we've advanced beyond that. But there definitely needs to be more easier language. I wasn't sure who had said it earlier, that community can really understand.
All right. Thank you, LaDonna. I've got Jeff and then Carrie also with their hands up, and then I have you, Kevin. Go ahead, Jeff.
I think that what's missing here is a simple summary of where we stand with flaring. and to what degree there have been trends over the last 5 to 10 years. In Richmond, North Richmond, San Pablo, where our concern is the Chevron refinery, we went from around 7 flaring events a year to 25 or 28. And that was partly, maybe a shakedown cruise for the new hydrogen plant. We don't really know. Chevron isn't terribly forthcoming about explaining this stuff. And it's gotten better. But what we do know is that we have 1 or 2 events a year that are really big, with lots of black smoke and with potentially significant health impacts. We don't, and they stand out. They're much bigger than other events. I don't know about the other refineries, but I'd like to know on this committee, I'd like us all to have the same information about how many flaring events we're getting a year for every one of the refineries, what have been the trends, and how many of them are really big, and how many of them are, hydrogen plant or startup, turnover, kind of normal operational plan flares. Break it down into the basic categories. And then we can talk about what the data tells us. I'd like us, in short, I'd like us to be all commit to each other to try to be data driven and to focus on the things that the data points us to.
So trends by category. Go ahead, Alex. Yeah. And then we'll come to you, Carrie. I see your hand up.
Yeah, just to respond to that, as part of our kind of like doing the analysis as part of the rule development process for the flare rule amendments, we are looking at the monthly flare data for the past 10 years as well as the causal reports. So we are hoping by end of this analysis, it may take some time that we hope to present to you as part of the rule development process as we go further on the rule development with the flare rule amendments. Just wanted to add that there.
So it's coming, Jeff, is the answer there. It's coming. Appreciate that. Carrie?
Thank you. Yeah. An important part of tonight's discussion definitely is on the distinguishing various types of flares, right? And making sure that the public understands the differences between different types of flares. And so I think part of what I'm thinking about too is the way that a flaring 101, once it's rolled out to the public, will, of course, humbly only reach a small slice of the public, but still so many more in the public want to know what's going on. And more than even just the general understanding of flares, they want to know, why did that particular flare just happen? Why did my kid have to run inside from the play yard during recess at school because there was a flare at the refinery? Do I need to be worried about that? What are the impacts that I should be concerned about? And so I think if we begin, or to incorporate in this process some type of rapid public notification whenever a flaring event takes place, but then in that, including that really important distinction, oh, that was a hydrogen flare, that was something instead from the cat cracker, right? It may also begin to address the concerns shared just during discussion now, purge gas, flexible gas, the whole thing. So I'm just hoping that we can think more than just the flaring 101 as we start to think about how we're going to share these distinctions with the public. Thanks.
Thank you, Carrie. And I think towards the end of the last section, we'll talk a little bit about where the air district's role may or may not be in that. But I think it's a good thing to call out here. We've got a couple more minutes. Kevin, I saw your hand up earlier. We did hear from you once. I'm gonna let Morgan jump in, then we'll come back to you. Come on, Morgan.
Okay, so one thing I would say is I kind of agree with Jeff on, you could put like a slide in here with the trend data. I think it's really cool, like seeing how when different regulations came in, how flaring is reduced, right? Like you look at the early 2000s compared to now, we're really low. So that's really cool and something that like the public should be aware of and the areas should be proud of, right? That's something to brag about. And then I also wanted to say that on slide 21, you pointed out that if flares are operated improperly or overloaded, there might be smoke. I think we all design our flares to handle the capacity of what can flow down them. right? Like, I think that's part of the processing through the documentation. So I don't know if that's like the right representation of what happens when you smoke. Also, sometimes flaring is paused because you lose your cogen, right? Like the thing producing steam at the refinery goes out. So you don't have steam to control the smoke. So it's not always improper. Sometimes it's something.
Okay.
Yeah.
Do you have questions about that to make this reflect it? Just want to make sure you all have that. Okay, cool. Kevin, and then Sharon, I saw you had something too. We'll let Kevin go, then come back.
I'll just hold on.
Okay.
I was just gonna bounce off what Todd had said about, it would really be nice to have something in this deck that indicates that due to a barrier district regulation 13.5, that they will see a constant flame on hydrogen flows. I think if we're gonna help answer questions of the public or educate them, I think that's helpful for them to know that, yeah, you could be, you're out near Richmond, you could, or near Marcy, you could be seeing a flare going nonstop because of the regulation.
Sharon.
Okay, so, you were saying that I found that when we have lots of hydrogen going into a flare, you don't see it during the day. So it's only at night, when it starts to be dark, that you see the flame from hydrogen, when it's burning. Is that
That's true.
what you guys?
No, that's 100% true.
Okay.
It's a
right.
it's a
Is it
blue
like
flame
it's
kind of
like-
like, yeah, it's a blue flame like when alcohol burns. You can't see it unless
Yeah.
you're at night and you can see the
And-
illumination from it.
Check with labor.
Yeah, and I think part of this process too, you're gonna have to share this information with the county, with the health department. After the fire in Martinez, you know, we sat through all the public hearings and they had a mother come up and said, you know, she took her baby to the hospital and asked the doctor, we're 2 blocks from the fire. And my baby's breathing this smoke. Is my baby okay? And the doctor's response was, I don't know. So I think, so whatever happens in this process, I think the county health department needs to also understand, you know, this process. Because that information and however this information comes down, you know, the public is going to reach out to the county health departments. And they're gonna lean on, you know, the hospitals and everybody else to try to give interpretation of, you know, of these new rules. And so I think that information also needs to go to them to help, you know, understand what these new rules are gonna be and how to interpret them.
Jeff, I see your hand up. Let's have the last comment on this section and then we'll move on. Is that a new hand, Jeff?
Yeah, it's a new hand. I just want to say, and I don't know, it's tricky, maybe in these first, maybe through this meeting, it's good to talk about both, you know, the current situation and what's wrong potentially, and begin that discussion, because that's the road that takes us to amending the existing rules, to improve the rules so that we have, you know, less unnecessary flaring and better understanding of what public health impacts are and what we specifically want to change and improve. I know in Richmond, that's what people want to know about. They want to know about what we're doing to reduce flaring, what we're doing to make flaring safe, what we're doing to prove that flaring is safe. You know, I mean, they're very cynical and they want to know that somebody's got their back and is actually analyzing everything. So the whole discussion about how do we make this understandable to people, I think that comes mostly after we figure out what we want to do, how we want to change 1212 and 1211 and maybe 1215. In other words, that's our job, is to figure out how to amend the existing rules to have a better management of flaring. So I don't want us to get to always go back and forth between how do we talk to the public and what do we want to do? I mean, it's kind of like you got to figure out what you want to do, and then you can figure out how you want to explain it all to the public.
Okay, thank you, Jeff. Thank you, Jeff. Let's move on to part 3. We're making good time here. Part 3, we're gonna go to the next slide, Vanessa, is focus on regulations and reporting. So we're gonna dive into the content. We'll hold comments and questions and suggestions until after the content's presented. So,
All right, next slide, please. So who regulates flares and flaring? So Air District is responsible for enforcing both the Air District and EPA regulations. Air District regulations that apply to flares there are Rule 1211, which is flare monitoring at refineries, and Rule 1212, flares at refineries. Rule 1211 contains requirements related to monthly flare report requirements, which include monitoring, recording, and sampling is present in this rule. There's also a requirement to quantify the vent gas volume and as well as determine the composition of the vent gas. For Rule 1212, requires submittal of the flare causal report for all flare reportable flaring events. And also there is also flare minimization plan update element that requires update of the flare minimization plan on an annual basis. So the EPA regulation or federal regulations that apply to flaring include 40 CFR Part 60 subpart JA and Part 63 subpart CC. Part 40 CFR Part 60 subpart JA contains a limit to sulfur containing emissions from flares, as well as requires the vent gas and sulfur continuous monitoring and reporting. As for Part 63 subpart CC, this regulation establishes requirements for proper combustion, as well as additional flare monitoring requirements. Next slide, please. So how does the Air District enforces flare rule requirements? So one of the way the Air District enforces flare rule requirements by reviewing reports required under Rules 1211 and Rule 1212 that are submitted to us. These reports include the monthly flare emissions data that are submitted required per Rule 1211, any annual flare minimization plan update to ensure continuous improvement as required by Rule 1212, review of the feasible prevention measures, as well as the flare causal reports as required by Rule 12. Another way the Air District enforces the rule requirement is through inspections, which include routine and non-routine inspections. Routine inspections refer to inspections that are performed on a regular basis to ensure compliance with the applicable Air District and federal regulations. Non-routine inspections is another category of inspection which may be triggered by air quality complaints received by the Air District, air quality incidents, which will be further discussed in the next section, and what's called reportable compliance activity, or RCA. RCA refers to specific events or conditions that must be reported to the Air District due to potential or actual exceedances of violation of air quality regulations. Next slide, please. So what is reported by facilities immediately after or during flaring? What information does the Air District receive? So this table summarizes the reports that the refinery provides to various agencies, including the Air District, as well as the local, state, and federal authorities immediately after or during flaring. We will welcome any feedback and comments you may have, as our goal is to ensure that this information presented in this table is accurate as we're considering including this information in our Flaring 101. For any flaring event where sulfur dioxide emissions exceed 500 pounds or hydrogen sulfide emissions of 100 pounds in a single 24-hour period, the facility is required to notify the National Response Center, state authorities, and local authorities of the reportable quantities. As required by EPA's Emergency Planning and Community Right to Know Act, commonly referred to as EPCRA, and Comprehensive Environmental Response Compensation and Liability Act, or referred to as CERCLA. For any flaring event where vent gas volume exceed 500,000 standard cubic feet in a calendar day, the facility is required to notify the air district as soon as possible, and this is done in accordance with section 405 of Rule 1212. For any flaring events as deemed as an incident by the local authority or first responder, which, as I mentioned before, will be discussed in the later section, the facility must notify appropriate local authorities depending on its location, such as Contra Costa County or City of Benicia. Once the event is determined as an incident by the local authority, a notification may be issued through a community warning system for Contra Costa or incident notification system. I believe this applies to the City of Benicia. The air district is notified automatically through the system, and when these notification or warning is issued through these systems. Another report the air district may receive is through, if when a complaint is received, the air district will be notified, of course, during a flaring event. And lastly, for flaring event that require first responders intervention for major incidences, the air district is notified by the responding agencies. In most cases, the facilities report to the local authorities what triggers an action from the first responders. Next slide, please. What follow reporting is required by the facility. The follow report to the air district include monthly flare report, as mentioned before, which is required within 30 days after the end of each month, as required by Rule 1211. Causal analysis report, which is required following the end of month, which is a report of flaring event occurs per Rule 1212. And flare minimization plan update, as I mentioned before, needs to be updated on an annual basis, and the updated flare minimization plan is required to be submitted by October 1st every year. There are also other follow reports required to be submitted to other agencies. For flaring event that exceeds the report quantity of 500 pounds of sulfur dioxide emissions or SO2 emissions, or 100 pounds of hydrogen sulfide emissions, a report is required within 7 days. For incident deemed by local authority as a level 2 or higher, that flaring event requires a follow report to be submitted to the local authorities within 72 hours, as well as within 30 days of the release. Next slide, please.
Okay. So I want to start this section. There are two tables shared on slide 29 and slide 30. And I think that Alex had said we'd like feedback on these tables, and I know there's a lot of content. So if you have that now, you want to write it down, you want to give it to us, that would be helpful there. And then I also want to open the floor to Jeff here with the county, and then we'll come to you, Todd. I think that county's mentioned quite a few times in these tables, once or twice perhaps. So if you have feedback on them, please do let us know.
Okay.
Todd, you have something. And then LaDonna, your hand is up, so come to you next.
So, good job of pointing out that all flaring has to be reported to the air district. I think there is a very common misconception that some flaring isn't reported. So if you flare 1 cubic foot of flare gas, that's a reportable event that goes to the air district in the monthly report. Now, the emergency reporting that you're seeing on flare 29 is a different scenario. That is for more significant flaring where there are more emissions involved. So I like how it's pointed out on a couple of places that, hey, this information is captured by the air district every month. So.
Okay. LaDonna, and then we'll come to Michael. LaDonna? Is she able to unmute?
Yes, okay. It's taking me a minute. My computer
That's
keeps
okay.
freezing. And I'm also getting comments from some of our residents as well from Vallejo. And the question keeps being asked, why is Vallejo not mentioned on these charts and tables? I understand that it's Contra Costa County where the Rodeo refineries or Phillips 66 is located. And then we've got, what is Benicia's area? Is that Contra Costa as well? I couldn't hear you. Say that again?
Solano County.
Benicia is considered Solano County?
Yeah.
Oh, why am I so confused about that? I thought they were on the borderline where they consider the refinery being, in any event. So then that's even worse. We see City of Benicia, of course, Richmond, Contra Costa. Why is Vallejo not mentioned in any of these tables? And shouldn't it be? Because we are directly impacted in blast zone, we're hit as well. So, we'd like an explanation on why it is that Vallejo is continually excluded from being mentioned or included in these tables.
Yeah, Victor.
It's not so much that Vallejo is being excluded. Benicia has an ordinance specifically in the city, so the city of Benicia has an ordinance referencing refineries, and then Contra Costa have ordinances and regulations referencing refineries. And so it's not to say that Benicia or Vallejo is not impacted by refineries. We're just showing you where the regulations are coming from.
I do have a question. Is Vallejo not covered under the community warning system by Contra Costa Health? Or
No, it's
not?
another
Not
county.
Contra Costa.
Got it. Okay.
Oh, I'm sorry. You know what? I'm like, why are they talking past me? Because I hit mute. My question, my question was, since Benicia has an ordinance and so does Contra Costa, Solano doesn't have an ordinance at all? I thought they had one. I thought a couple of years ago there was somewhat an ordinance when we were working on safety notifications.
Log on, so that's something I can look into on my end with, with internal folks and compliance enforcement. And that's something an oversight on my end, so, let me look into, what is the typical notification that may be issued equivalent to a community warning system or incident notification system in Indonesia, but I didn't mean to leave out Vallejo, I just thought it may have been within Contra Costa's jurisdiction, but I was mistaken, sorry about that.
Oh, okay. Okay, and I couldn't see who was talking because my screen is bouncing around. I saw the tables and then half the wording was jarbled, and then I see part of you guys, I guess, that are in person. So I couldn't see who made that comment.
That was Alexander Stone with the Air District.
Oh, okay.
Yeah. So we'll follow up, with that update when.
Okay, okay, thank you.
We had another comment in Michael.
Yeah, wherever it fits in these tables, I think there should be, some emphasis on Contra Costa County's system. I know it doesn't include Benicia, but, I can tell you for a fact that the Air District calls me a minute after the CWS warning goes off. And we have absolutely zero information generally, and we're working scrambling to get everything figured out, but the Bay Area Air District is immediately alerted, and I think it's a wonderful system. And I'm hoping down the road when we talk about notifications and things like that, that there's some way to use one system rather than a completely totally separate one, because this one's already very effective. Trust me, I every time a flare goes off, we had a 30, maybe a 7-minute flare the other day because they were switching over something unanticipated. I told my team, I said, just call the inspector now, that way you don't have to worry about waiting for her to call you, because usually the county calls, but also the inspector will be right there. So I think that should be emphasized somewhere in here, that I'm assuming that's Bay Area District's policy and not just a really overzealous inspector.
Okay.
But I never asked that question.
Yeah, so emphasize that a bit and also emphasize the Contra Costa system. Thank you.
Yeah, I was just gonna agree with, well, they call you pretty quick and they're usually on site. So the inspectors are doing a good job, and Contra Costa Health, every time they call, they say, are there any health impacts? So maybe that's something you guys can work on, is we're already getting calls, right? And maybe just read that information. And also the sheriff calls, so we do get a lot of random calls.
A flare of that event too wouldn't be reported until your flare report at the end of that month. And it's not like we wouldn't be required to call the air district and say, hey, we had a 7-minute flare. It would go in a monthly report. Like I'm saying, that there's already a really good system in place for flares.
I think one of the other requirements is that the refineries are supposed to take photographs of their flare tips. I think it's, and they submit it on a CD, is it like every minute or something like that?
I'm not
You're
familiar.
not familiar with that?
But it, we submit ours online, it's like shared, and we don't have to see.
Oh.
It's-
Old school.
I think, Annie gets them.
But my point is that there's like digital photographs taken of the flare tips all day long,
Okay,
like every minute. And I think that would be important for the public to realize that the district gets this feed. And so there's not only if the community warning system goes off, the district wouldn't surprise me if they're part of that to where they get notification. There's also these nonstop streaming of photographs. So that the district.
thanks, Kevin. Eric, anything to add? We haven't heard from you yet tonight. Is there any thoughts, context? How's this landing with you?
Yeah, we're a hydro only plant, so it's somewhat different for us as our flare. That's per tied to them.
I just want to make sure you have opportunity to share when you do. You're not being left out here. All right, we have Jeff online. I'm sorry, and Jeff in person. And Jeff, we're gonna come back to you. Sorry.
So I think there's one thing missing here, and then a general comment about the whole table. The thing that I think is missing is how you want to characterize the reporting of the emissions by stack, by hour. Because the thing about flaring is that, you know, there's a peak, there's a spike in the emissions. It may only be 30 minutes, it might be 2 or 3 hours. It's not long, but it's quite possible that that's the major health concern, is what is coming out in these peak hours from particular stacks. So I don't think it's required explicitly in any of the rules right now. It does exist to some degree. But it should be characterized because it's an important element. And then a more general comment about the table is some of this is just like a breakdown of what's required in the rules. And I guess what I'm interested in and what I would suggest is, you know, we need another column in this table, even if that turns it into a 10-page, you know, document. We need a column to have a bulleted list of things that are not working or are inadequate or you know, or unclear about each subject. Because this just says here's all the things that happen, but there's no, you know, there's no meat on it to grab hold of and say, you know, is there anything wrong here? Can we do anything better? Are there any weaknesses? What do we need to improve? So in other words, this table, it's a structure, but to make it a useful tool for improvement, we need to, you know, add a column and build a collective list of the weaknesses of these things. And maybe the air district should do it first and populate it with their opinions about what's not good about the way things are going with some of these things. But many of us probably can add bullets too. But how, you know, that's kind of that. This goes to the question of how are we going to work together to efficiently get to amendments to the rules.
Adding a column for more context, questions, and what they have in authority. I see your hand, Sharon.
So, to address Jeff's question, in our causal analysis reports, we would typically generate preventative measures to help decrease flaring or prevent it from reoccurrence. And so that's one of the things that is, that we actively do. And then we incorporate those prevention measures into our FNP with the annual updates. So that's one of the key things on to steadily improve our processes. So, just thought I'd mention that's already something that we do already.
Thank you, Sharon. Alright. Yeah.
I think, one thing that kind of stood out to me is just in the spirit of this being a 101 level course is when you're looking at this table and you're seeing all these reportable quantities, I think it might be helpful just to kind of touch on the monitoring capabilities that the refineries do have on these flares. What real-time data is captured, what capabilities exist. You know, even maybe discuss some of the fence line monitoring that all our refineries have as well. I think that would kind of fit well, maybe not even in this section, but I think when we're talking about these, 500 pounds of SO2, well, how do they even know, if, that would kind of be my first question as a member of the public. So I think it might be helpful just to kind of touch on, what capabilities the refineries have to monitor their flare emissions. And then just the other thing to kind of comment on the community warning side of things. Within like the past year or so, the county board of supervisors implemented a level 0 notification, which I'm sure you guys at the refineries are aware of and how that pertains to flaring. But really, when you guys do get that call for level 0, that's really just to confirm, because the level 0 is supposed to be just for visible only, no offsite impact, but we do have 24/7, 365 staff available and on call to go out into the field and do monitoring. And so when we do get those level 0s, we do like to just confirm that they don't need to be upgraded. We don't need to move to level 1 or level 2. It does sound like maybe there might be some room for improvement or some back and forth with the air district, and when they call, or you said you get the sheriff calling as well. The sheriff runs and operates the community warning system, so that might be why they're reaching out. But it sounds like there might be some room for improvement.
Sharon, did you have another
Well, I just
comment?
want to piggyback up what Jeff was talking about. We have online analyzers that measure H2S going to our flares, and that's how we calculate the SO2. And also, it's very robust. We have flare flow meters. So all of that helps you, get the calculations done. And so, matter of fact, we have it automated so that it's doing real-time calculations. So we know, hey, we've hit 500 pounds, or we've reached the 500,000 scuffs. All of that's computerized, on computers.
Right. Did you have something?
No.
Okay. Thank you. Lots of input on this. We're gonna shift to our fourth section. And for the sake of time, again, we'll go through these slides and then take comments and questions. This one is on enforcement and incident response, and it's the last section of the flaring 101.
All right, thanks, William. Next slide. So how are flaring inspections and investigation performed? Flaring related inspections and investigation be performed for different purposes. And one of those purposes is immediately following, or immediate response following a flaring event. So when there's a flaring event, inspection staff will gather a preliminary information related to flaring event. And this may include contact the refinery staff to gather information regarding the flaring event, as mentioned by some of the folks here already. Observing flaring for visible emissions, checking available monitoring, including fence line monitors and ground level monitors for elevator readings, as well as performing patrols near the refinery where the flaring event had occurred. Based on this information, the area district will determine the level of response needed. The level of response that may be needed will be event specific. For example, a flaring event that may have been determined by an incident by a local authority, or a flaring event that may be due to an emergency or unplanned malfunctions will have a different response in comparison to flaring that had occurred in accordance with the flaring minimization plan. Then the air district will then assign the needed support staff and inspector as appropriate for the flaring event. If needed, assign additional staff or place staff on an after-hour standby for investigation. Next slide, please. Flare investigation may also be performed due to a complaint received through a complaint response and investigation. The responding to air quality related complaint is one of the highest priority for the air district, which can be submitted via our website or phone. The QR code can be shown, is shown on this slide. And access, provides an access to the website where air quality related complaints can be submitted online. And it also contains phone numbers to complaint line is also provided here. As for the complaints, all complaints are documented and investigated by inspectors. And during flaring events, documented complaints can be used as evidence for enforcement actions if the flaring event was found to be in violation of any of the applicable air district regulation as well as federal regulations. On-site inspections, once it is safe to do so, the inspection staff will be on site. Inspector will meet with the environmental health and safety staff and refinery operators to investigate the root cause of the event. As part of the investigation, the air district may request and review the refinery process diagrams, flare causal reports, and emissions data. The inspector also inspects record related to equipment maintenance and procedural records to ensure that the flaring event from beginning to finish is documented accurately. And if the air district discovers any violation, the air district may take appropriate enforcement actions. Next slide. As part of flaring investigation, the air district also reviews reports and records related to flaring. These reports include monthly flaring emissions data required for Rule 1211, as well as flare cost report that are required for all reportable flaring events, and updated flare minimization plan that are required to be updated and submitted on an annual basis per Rule 1212. For these reports and records, the air district verifies the administrative requirements, including timeliness and completeness. And we also check for the content of these submissions, including the adequate sampling, determine whether adequate sample has been taken as required by the rule. The cause of the flaring event was the cause of the flaring event documented accurately, repeated and recurring problem. Has the refinery flare for the same cause before? Corrective actions were appropriate actions taken to minimize the magnitude of and the duration of the flaring. And lastly, was the flaring consistent with the flare minimization plan? Did the flaring event action caused during the event consistent with the condition of the flare minimization plan? Next slide, please. So I know that like throughout this presentation, we mentioned what we referred to an incident, and I just wanted to touch base on what the incident refers to. The incident is defined as a non-routine release of air contaminant may cause adverse health consequences to the public or to emergency personnel responding to the release, or that may cause a public nuisance or offsite environmental damage. Next slide, please. What are the air district role in incident response related to a flaring event? The air districts supports the first responders to help minimize the impact of the incident on the public. The air district rely on local authorities to determine whether an event warrants an incident response. First responders may include county health department, fire department, California occupational and safety and health administration, as well as California Highway Patrol, just to give you some examples there. The primary role of the air district during an incident is to perform incident investigation and to enforce air quality regulations and requirements. And the incident investigation enforcement effort may include dispatching the inspection staff to the site of the incident, contacting the facility to gather information related to the incident and gain access to the on-site of the incident, and assessing compliance with air quality regulations and incident. The air district also responds to air quality complaints during an incident, as the air district receives a lot of complaints during flaring events, typically with a lot of visible emissions. The air district also can do assessment of air quality impacts as appropriate, but may not have a primary role in this assessment. We may partner with other agencies to determine the type of analysis and assessment that may be needed to be done. Coordination with other agencies and enforcement, health impacts and messaging. And lastly, we provide timely and relevant information to the public. This can also be done with collaboratively with the other agencies. And air district also issues air quality advisory as if needed through email and text alerts, social media posts, and air district website.
Okay. And that's I think we jumped too far on the deck. I go back, but that's the end of the 101 presentation. So again, pausing, how did that land with you? Is there anything from your perspectives that you think can be adapted to be more accurate, that you think can be better set for the public? Or additional context that would be helpful for the Air District to know as we go about updating this information?
Just maybe one item for consideration, to kind of tag on what Jeff said before. You may want to have another slide that talks about other organizations' roles, like county health certainly has a role. And other first responders, just so you have context that the Air District isn't the only agency looking at flaring.
Okay, so broaden other agencies with roles, Air District's not the only one. Thank you. Anything else? Anything else on earlier slides, since we had a little bit of time? Okay.
Well, I'm over, so anything, Michael, I'm trying to jump from which one was your name? Kevin, all kind of iterated the point that, hydrogen flares are going to be, visible at all times, and what we're flaring, I think, I'd like to emphasize that it's gonna be hydrogen, it's gonna be CO2, it's going to be nitrogen, depending on your purge gas and your PSA, things like that. And this is, at least at Air Product sites, in my opinion, it's really driven by compliance with 13.5. I don't know if this necessarily needs to be captured, but this was something that I did want to reiterate. This was an important thing for us.
So a little more emphasis on that somewhere in the deck. Okay.
Maybe a breakdown on slide 23. It just says negligible SO2 and PM. May be helpful saying it is there. Which most, when you combust hydrogen, you get water vapor.
We still have the Zoom.
Yeah, we stopped this.
Okay, I think we just changed the.
Yeah, we just changed it. All right.
Oh, yeah, one consideration for rural development in the future is to subtract out hydrogen. Because like, some of our consent decrees actually allow you to take out, something like hydrogen. So it's not, so that's something that the district consider.
When you're in reference to hydrogen flares?
In reference to, perhaps reporting, that sort of thing. Because if it's hydrogen.
You're referencing like composition, right?
Yeah, composition. Exactly.
I'm gonna ask staff, any comments or questions you heard tonight, you wanna just double check, follow up on, we have a little bit of time, so just.
I just have one, it's just something Kevin touched on earlier, speaking to these slides as the product for the public. This is the process, and I agree, a lot of what's in these slides isn't what we would just public. So the process is, we're getting a lot of great input from industry tonight on the accuracy of this information. We've got community listening, and the next steps is to get some feedback from the community, as well as with our folks at the Air District to make this more digestible. Public. So it's that process, so I appreciate everyone's comments today.
One other item, not we focused on 13.5, there's another community reg process, vessel opening reg 810 that requires you to go to the flare. So there are other regulations that they want you to purge to a closed system to evacuate the last little bit of hydrocarbon before we open it to atmosphere. So in addition to 13.5.
Morgan, then Chuck.
I was just gonna say on this, like slide 29, what we're reporting, if we maybe have a problem about what's publicly available, most of it is, it's either posted on your website or OES's website. So like, if the health is wanting to know what's happening, they can read it, it might just be very turn. So, okay, that is a barrier.
I'm gonna go back to a comment Kevin made here at the beginning of this meeting about this meeting started at 5:30. And I don't want to beat a dead horse, but because I sit on state and county commissions. And I mean, we even make our senators and our congressmen come in during work time, and if they can't, they just send their chief of staffs, right? But I got a dozen mayors that show up, and a whole bunch of people show up to our state commission and county commission, and I think everybody here this is their jobs. And we're all here at like 5:30 at night. And so I never even thought of it, but I'm wondering, we're here at 5:30, and so I didn't know if there's an opportunity, whereas we move on, maybe we can do this at 10 o'clock in the morning or 11 o'clock, during my regular work time, right? Because I kind of do this for a living, like I think everybody in this room. And so I didn't know how this started at 5:30. I just throwing it out there. That's all. I didn't know how everybody felt, and I didn't know, but this is the only meeting I do that starts at 5:30 in the evening, unless I'm at a conference in Sacramento or in Miami or Washington DC or somewhere.
We do also have over 25 people watching online that are from the public. So I think like beyond perspectives here, there's more to consider, but comment duly noted from the beginning and from now, and we'll take it back with the air district. I have Jeff's hand up online, and then a little bit of a follow-up about our next steps. I'm gonna make sure we have time to get to it.
Thank you.
Jeff. Okay.
I just like to emphasize that for the community is not interested in long presentations about how BACMD works. And in fact, they're not really interested in the details of how a refinery works. It's pretty complicated. So, those things need to be really simple. What we need to focus on, what our responsibility is in this gathering, is to try to figure out if there's any way we can reduce flaring, reasonably, feasibly, if we can make flaring information better and more understandable, if we can get causal reports that are worth the paper they're written on. We don't have those things right now. And for us to go to the community, I can tell you for sure about Richmond, for us to go to the Richmond community without a set of improvements is just it's not okay. This group needs to be focused on improving things. And if people are unclear about what's wrong, the AB 617 steering committee has been working on this for 5 years. We know what's wrong from a community perspective. And I don't think we're unreasonable, but we do believe it can be done better. So, I guess I just want to be clear that we need goals for improvement and to work together to make sure, we're not going in different directions or asking for the impossible or, whatever. I don't want to, be crazy here, but I want to go back to the community of Richmond that has at least one major scary flaring event every year and many less scary events every year. I'm going to tell them how we're going to make it better. Please.
All right, we've got a minute left, so I'm gonna stop you there, Jeff, but thank you very much. I want to jump to the next slide if we can. Just jump one more, please. Our next meeting, this is when it's scheduled, and it's on improvements to refinery fence line air monitoring requirements. If we go to the next slide quickly. Between now and the next meeting, and it is 7:30 on the dot, so I'm gonna ask this question, but also know that I want to get folks out of here on time. We did start a little late and I apologize. I want you to think about if there's anything related to Rule 1215 that you would want the air district to go over in the next meeting. So we're shifting focuses a little bit for that specific meeting and having a little bit of a topic change, focusing on that 1215. So between now and maybe in the next few weeks, if you have any thoughts on what you want to hear, let us know and I can hang back and grab some more feedback there. In our next meeting, I also want you to expect to receive more information from us directly to Norethnica about logistics. So expect emails from me and my team about, making sure you're getting materials on time, registration and things like that. And we'll send anything we want you to review ahead of that meeting as well and make sure we call out like.
When's
we're
the
gonna-
next meeting?
October 29th. October 29th, and you're gonna get an email after this with the summary and. Next slide. It is 7:31, so we can adjourn here, but I can hang back for additional questions. If you have any input on the next meeting topic already, that's top of mind, let us know, but it'll be October 29th. Any closing things?
I think for the next, meeting, Joseph, Kate, you guys wanted to touch on it real quick?
Yeah, I'll just note that we are already planning the next meeting, and we do have some ideas of information that we both want to share with you and get from you, but we also want to make sure that, you know, this meeting is productive and useful for you all. So we really do invite you, if you have, you know, things you want to get out of the meeting, discussions you want to talk about related to fine monitoring, and we invite you to let Mona know, she can pass that information.
Joe, could you, for the community members still online, explain what 1215 is?
Oh, sorry, yeah, so Rule 1215 includes, requirements for fence line monitoring at the refineries, and, you know, we've told, public that we are considering, revising those requirements. We're beginning the rule development process now, and, you know, as part of our early engagement efforts, you know, we're looking forward to talking with this group about what that means. You know, putting timeline and our process forward.
All right. Well, with that, we want to say thank you all for your time this evening and all your comments. If there's anything additional between now and then, feel free to reach out. And if you haven't eaten, grab some food on the way out. Anything else?
Please grab some.
Please grab some. Okay. Thank you all.
Yeah, thank you very much, yeah.